Right now, millions of people are spending hours fighting hunger because they believe it is the fastest path to burning fat. Some go without food for an entire day. Others push through 36 hours. Some even challenge themselves to 48-hour fasts, convinced that the longer they avoid eating, the more fat their bodies will burn. But what if one of the biggest assumptions about fat loss is incomplete? What if the real secret is not found in avoiding food altogether, but in understanding how your body chooses which fuel to burn? Hidden inside your body is a powerful system that most people never think about. It quietly influences your energy, your cravings, your metabolism, and even how easily you can access stored body fat. The surprising part is that this system can often be influenced without forcing yourself through days of hunger. Many people spend years counting calories, skipping meals, and searching for the perfect diet while completely overlooking a biological process that may be playing a much bigger role than they realize. And once you understand it, the way you look at fat burning may never be the same again. The truth is that your body is not simply a machine that burns fat whenever you eat less food. It is constantly making decisions. Every minute of every day, it chooses where to get energy. Sometimes it relies heavily on carbohydrates. Sometimes it turns to stored fat. Sometimes it switches between both. The difference between these states can dramatically affect how you feel, how much energy you have, and how effectively your body uses its own fat reserves. Most people focus only on the amount of food they eat. Very few pay attention to the fuel switching process happening beneath the surface. Yet this hidden process may explain why some people struggle with stubborn fat despite eating less, while others seem to unlock fat burning more efficiently without extreme dieting. In this video, you are going to learn why fasting often works better than many traditional diets, but also why fasting itself may not be the entire story. You will discover the little-known role of glycogen, a stored form of energy that lives inside your muscles and liver. Most people have heard the word before, but never truly understood why it matters. Yet, glycogen may be one of the most important pieces of the fat-burning puzzle. Researchers have spent years studying how glycogen levels affect metabolism, energy production, and fat oxidation. What they found challenges many popular beliefs about weight loss. The more scientists learn about this hidden fuel reserve, the more they uncover fascinating connections between carbohydrate intake, energy balance, and the body's ability to tap into stored fat. You will also learn why many people mistake hunger for fat burning. These two things are not always the same. Feeling hungry does not automatically mean your body is burning maximum fat. In some cases, people spend hours feeling miserable without fully understanding what is happening inside their metabolism. By the end of this video, you will understand the difference between simply eating less and creating the conditions that encourage your body to rely more heavily on fat as fuel. That distinction can change the entire approach to weight management. There is another surprising fact that rarely gets discussed. Your body stores energy in a way that resembles a hybrid vehicle. It has multiple fuel sources available at the same time. One source is fast and convenient. Another is larger and designed for long-term storage. The body naturally prefers one fuel under certain conditions and switches to another when circumstances change. Understanding this fuel preference system is one of the keys to understanding why a simple change in carbohydrate intake can sometimes produce effects that look remarkably similar to fasting. This does not mean carbohydrates are bad. It does not mean everyone should avoid them. In fact, one of the biggest mistakes people make is turning nutrition into a battle between good foods and bad foods. The real story is far more interesting than that. As we move through this video, you will discover why metabolic flexibility has become an important topic among researchers and health experts. You will learn what metabolic flexibility actually means, why many people may have lost some of it without realizing it, and how improving it could help your body become more efficient at switching between different fuel sources. This concept may explain why some people feel energetic and focused even when they have not eaten for hours, while others experience intense cravings and energy crashes. The answers are often found inside the body's fuel management system. You will also discover a practical carbohydrate strategy that many people overlook. This is not a crash diet. It is not starvation. It is not an extreme challenge designed to make life miserable. Instead, it focuses on understanding timing, energy storage, and the biological signals that influence fat burning. The goal is not to punish your body. The goal is to work with it. Once you understand the mechanism behind the process, many of the confusing and conflicting weight loss messages start making a lot more sense. Stay with me until the end, because one of the most important lessons comes later in the video. We are going to uncover why many people accidentally slow their progress by focusing on the wrong target. We will explore a simple shift in thinking that can completely change how you approach fat loss. You will also learn who should be careful with fasting and aggressive carbohydrate restriction, because what works for one person may not be appropriate for another. Understanding the science is important, but understanding how to apply it safely is even more important. By the time this video is over, you will know what glycogen is, why it plays such a critical role in fat burning, how fasting influences it, why a strategic carbohydrate approach may create similar metabolic effects, and how your body decides when to burn carbohydrates and when to burn fat. More importantly, you will understand why successful fat loss is often less about suffering and more about understanding the rules your body already follows every single day. So if you are ready to uncover one of the most overlooked concepts in modern fat loss, if you want to understand what is really happening beneath the surface of your metabolism, and if you want to learn why a simple carbohydrate strategy may change the way you think about fasting forever, then you are in the right place. Welcome to Neuromotivation Lab, where we explore the science, psychology, and hidden mechanisms that can help you transform your body and mind. If you enjoy content that breaks down complex ideas into simple practical lessons, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a future video. Now, let us begin with the hidden fuel tank inside your body that may be controlling far more of your fat burning potential than you realize. One of the biggest ideas that has shaped the way people think about fat loss is surprisingly simple, almost too simple. It is the belief that eating less automatically leads to burning more fat. On the surface, this idea makes perfect sense. If you reduce food intake, your body must use stored energy to make up the difference. That stored energy is assumed to be body fat, so the conclusion feels obvious. Eat less, burn more fat. This belief has been repeated for so long that it has become almost automatic in people's thinking. It appears in diets, in fitness advice, and in everyday conversations about weight loss. Yet when you look closer at how the human body actually works, this idea begins to feel incomplete. The body does not operate on a single switch that turns fat burning on and off based only on how much you eat. Instead, it is constantly managing different fuel systems at the same time, making decisions based on availability, demand, and efficiency. Inside the body, energy is not stored in only one form. There are multiple layers of fuel, each with a different purpose. Some energy is designed for quick use, ready to be accessed within moments. Other energy is stored more deeply, meant for longer-term survival and slower release. The body does not treat all energy sources equally. It prioritizes what is easiest and fastest to use before moving to what is stored for later. This is where carbohydrates come into the picture. When carbohydrates are available in the system, the body tends to use them first. Not because fat is unwanted or inferior, but because carbohydrates provide a faster and more immediate source of fuel. They are easier to break down and convert into energy. The body naturally prefers efficiency. So, when carbs are present, they often become the first choice for energy production. This is where confusion begins for many people trying to lose weight. They assume that fat burning is only about reducing food intake or cutting calories. But the body does not simply switch to fat just because less food is consumed. It also considers which fuel is available and which fuel is easiest to access at that moment. If carbohydrates are still readily available in the system, the body may continue relying on them even during a calorie deficit. This means that fat burning is not only influenced by how much you eat, but also by what type of fuel your body is currently prioritizing. Two people can eat similar amounts of food and still experience different levels of fat burning depending on how their bodies are managing fuel sources internally. This is why the idea of eat less, burn more fat can sometimes feel misleading in real life. People reduce their food intake, but their progress does not always match their expectations. They may feel hungry, tired, or restricted, yet not see the changes they expected. This is because hunger and fat burning are not always directly connected in the way people assume. The body can still rely heavily on carbohydrates or other energy sources even when food intake is reduced. It depends on internal storage, hormonal signals, and metabolic state. So the real question is not only how much food is being eaten, but also what fuel the body is actually using at that moment. To understand this more clearly, it is important to move away from the idea that fat loss is a simple equation. Instead, it is more accurate to think of it as a fuel selection process. The body is constantly choosing between different energy sources. Sometimes it uses glucose from carbohydrates. Sometimes it uses stored glycogen. Sometimes it begins to rely more heavily on fat. These choices are influenced by what is available inside the system. If carbohydrates are present in abundance, the body will often use them first. If they are limited, the body begins to look for alternative sources of energy. This is where deeper stored energy systems begin to play a larger role. At this point, it becomes clear that fat burning is not simply about eating less. It is about which fuel source is being activated and prioritized. This shift in understanding changes the entire perspective on dieting. Instead of focusing only on restriction, it becomes important to understand how the body transitions between fuel types. And this transition is not random. It follows a biological structure that has been built for survival over thousands of years. The body is designed to adapt to different energy conditions, and it does so by switching between available fuel reserves. To understand this process more deeply, it is necessary to look at a specific form of stored energy inside the body that plays a key role in how fuel is managed. This energy is not fat, although it is closely connected to fat burning. It is stored in a different way, and it acts as a short-term reserve that the body relies on before it begins to increase fat usage more significantly. This stored energy is known as glycogen. It exists in two main places inside the body, and its role is far more important than most people realize when it comes to understanding fat loss. Glycogen is stored in the liver and in the muscles. It functions as a quick access energy source, almost like a backup battery that the body can draw from instantly when needed. Think of it as the body's immediate fuel reserve. When energy demand is high or when food has recently been consumed, the body fills this glycogen storage system. It becomes readily available fuel that can be used for movement, brain function, and general energy needs. As long as this system is full, the body has a convenient and efficient source of energy that it prefers to use before turning to deeper reserves. When glycogen levels are high, the body tends to rely heavily on it. This means that even if someone is in a calorie deficit, their body may still prioritize glycogen for energy instead of immediately switching to large amounts of fat burning. The body does not rush into using stored fat when an easier fuel source is still available. It follows a hierarchy of energy use. Glycogen sits closer to the top of that hierarchy because it is easier and faster to access compared to fat stores, which require more steps to break down and convert into usable energy. As glycogen begins to decrease, something important starts to change inside the body. The energy system begins to shift. The body starts to gradually increase fat oxidation, which is the process of breaking down fat for energy. This transition does not happen instantly. It is a gradual adjustment that occurs as the body senses that its quick access fuel supply is becoming limited. Research in metabolism has shown that when carbohydrate availability is reduced, the body often responds by increasing its reliance on fat as a fuel source. This is not a random reaction. It is a structured metabolic response designed to maintain energy balance when primary fuel stores begin to decline. This is one of the reasons why fasting often appears to be so effective for fat loss. During fasting, carbohydrate intake is completely stopped. Without incoming carbohydrates, the body begins to use stored glycogen to meet its energy needs. As fasting continues, these glycogen stores slowly decrease. As they decline further, the body begins to shift more noticeably toward fat oxidation. This is when stored body fat starts to play a larger role in energy production. The body is no longer relying mainly on quick access glycogen. Instead, it begins to tap into longer-term energy reserves to maintain function. During this process, insulin levels also tend to drop. Insulin is a hormone that is closely linked to carbohydrate intake and energy storage. When insulin decreases, it signals the body to reduce storage activity and increase energy release. At the same time, fat oxidation rises, meaning the body is increasingly using fat as fuel. In longer fasting periods, ketone production may also increase. Ketones are molecules produced when the body breaks down fat for energy, especially when carbohydrate availability is low. This metabolic state has been widely studied in fasting research and is often associated with increased fat utilization. Because of these changes, many people assume that fasting itself has a unique fat-burning power. They believe that the act of not eating is what triggers fat loss in a special way. But when you look more closely at the underlying mechanisms, a different picture begins to appear. Fasting may not be a magical process on its own. Instead, it may simply be one of the most direct ways to create a low glycogen environment inside the body. By removing incoming carbohydrates completely, fasting forces the body to gradually reduce its glycogen stores, which then leads to a shift in fuel usage toward fat. This understanding changes the way fasting is interpreted. Instead of seeing it as a separate fat-burning mechanism, it can be viewed as a method that influences the body's internal fuel availability. The reduction in glycogen appears to be a key factor in how the body transitions toward increased fat oxidation. This means that the real driver behind many of the effects associated with fasting may not be fasting itself, but the metabolic state it creates within the body over time. There is a point in understanding metabolism where things start to feel less like mystery and more like structure. Once you realize that the body is constantly switching between fuel sources, a new question naturally appears. If fasting can shift the body toward greater fat use by lowering carbohydrate availability, is there a way to create a similar effect without going through long periods of not eating at all? This is where a different approach begins to make sense. It is not extreme. It is not based on suffering or restriction for the sake of discipline. It is based on timing, availability, and how the body responds to changes in fuel input. This approach is often described as strategic carbohydrate reduction, and the idea behind it is surprisingly simple. Instead of removing food completely, you adjust the type and timing of carbohydrates in a way that encourages the body to gradually rely more on stored energy. This is not about cutting carbohydrates forever. It is not about eliminating entire food groups or treating carbohydrates as something dangerous. It is about temporary adjustment. When carbohydrate intake is reduced for a short period, the body begins to respond in a predictable way. It starts using stored glycogen more actively because there is less incoming glucose from food. As glycogen levels begin to slowly decrease, the body does what it is designed to do. It begins to shift toward alternative fuel sources. This is where fat oxidation can become more active. The body does not panic. It adapts. It follows the same survival logic it has always used, choosing efficiency and balance over waste. Some research and metabolic observations suggest that when carbohydrate intake is reduced in a controlled and temporary way, the body can enter a state that shares similarities with fasting, even though food is still being consumed. The key difference is not complete absence of food, but reduced reliance on carbohydrates as the primary fuel source. When this happens, insulin response becomes more stable. Glycogen stores are not constantly replenished at high levels, and the body gradually begins to rely more on fat for energy. This does not happen instantly. It is a gradual shift that becomes more noticeable over time as the internal fuel balance changes. In a practical sense, this approach often involves lowering refined carbohydrates and highly processed foods for a period of time. Instead of focusing on constant carbohydrate intake, the emphasis shifts toward nutrient-dense meals that support satiety and metabolic balance. Protein intake becomes more important because it supports muscle maintenance and helps regulate hunger signals. Whole foods become the foundation of meals because they provide a more stable energy release and reduce rapid spikes in blood sugar that can keep the body locked into frequent carbohydrate dependency. Vegetables, natural protein sources, and minimally processed foods become the main structure of eating during this phase. As carbohydrate intake is lowered, glycogen stores are not being constantly refilled at the same rate. This allows them to gradually decrease over time. As this happens, the body starts to experience a change in fuel availability. It still has energy, but the quick access carbohydrate reserve is no longer always full. This creates a subtle shift in how energy is produced and used. The body begins to rely more on stored energy between meals. For many people, this transition feels different from traditional dieting. Instead of constant restriction or hunger, there is often a more stable sense of energy once the body adapts. Cravings may initially appear, but they often change over time as the metabolic system adjusts to a different fuel pattern. One of the interesting observations in this process is that many people find it easier than prolonged fasting. Long fasting periods require complete absence of food intake, which can be mentally and physically demanding for many individuals. Strategic carbohydrate reduction, on the other hand, still allows eating while influencing the body's fuel selection process. This makes it more sustainable for a wider range of people. It does not rely on extreme discipline in the same way that long fasting protocols do. Instead, it works by adjusting internal conditions gradually, allowing the body to adapt without feeling completely deprived of energy intake. It is important to understand that this is not about fearing carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are not the enemy of fat loss, nor are they something that needs to be removed permanently for health. They are simply one type of fuel that the body uses based on availability and need. The purpose of this approach is not to create fear around food, but to create awareness around timing and fuel balance. When carbohydrates are constantly available in large amounts, the body may remain in a state where it continues to prioritize them as a primary energy source. When their intake is adjusted temporarily, the body gains the opportunity to use other energy systems more actively. This is where flexibility becomes important. This leads directly into a concept that is central to long-term metabolic health: It is known as metabolic flexibility. A healthy metabolism is not one that depends on a single fuel source all the time. It is one that can switch smoothly between different fuels depending on conditions. Sometimes the body uses carbohydrates efficiently. Other times it uses fat more effectively. This switching ability is what allows energy levels to remain stable across different situations. When metabolic flexibility is strong, the body can adapt to periods of eating, fasting, activity, and rest without extreme fluctuations in energy or hunger. However, many people gradually move away from this flexible state without realizing it. When the diet consistently contains frequent carbohydrates, especially refined and fast-digesting ones, the body may begin to rely heavily on them as the main energy source. Over time, this can reduce the efficiency of switching between fuels. As a result, when meals are delayed, energy levels may drop more sharply. Hunger may appear more frequently. Cravings may become stronger and more persistent. The body becomes accustomed to a regular supply of quick fuel, and when that pattern is interrupted, it reacts more strongly. This is where strategic carbohydrate reduction can feel powerful for many people. It is not because it introduces something new, but because it removes constant dependence on one fuel source for a period of time. By doing so, the body is encouraged to tap into stored energy more often. Glycogen is used more efficiently, and fat stores become a more active part of energy production. Over time, this can help restore a more balanced relationship between different fuel systems. Instead of relying heavily on frequent carbohydrate intake, the body begins to relearn how to shift between fuels based on what is available. As this process continues, people often notice that their relationship with hunger begins to change. Meals may feel more satisfying. Energy may feel more stable between eating periods. The urgency for constant snacking may reduce. These changes are not the result of forcing the body into deprivation. They come from allowing the metabolic system to adjust to a different pattern of fuel input. The body is highly adaptable, and when conditions change gradually, it responds by recalibrating how it uses energy. To apply this method in a practical way, the structure does not need to be complicated. It often begins with a simple shift in daily food choices. Refined carbohydrates are reduced, especially those that are highly processed and quickly digested. Instead, meals are built around protein sources that support satiety and metabolic stability. Vegetables are included regularly to provide fiber and nutrients without excessive energy spikes. Water intake becomes important because hydration supports metabolic function and energy regulation. Physical movement, even in simple forms like walking after meals, helps the body utilize energy more effectively and supports overall metabolic balance. Consistency plays a key role in this process. The goal is not to create a strict short-term challenge that feels like punishment. It is to create a pattern that the body can adjust to over time. When the system is repeatedly exposed to the same balanced conditions, it begins to stabilize around them. The mistake many people make is turning every nutritional strategy into an extreme cycle. They either restrict heavily or return to high intake patterns without balance. The body responds to both extremes in ways that can create instability. The intention here is different. The intention is to create flexibility, not stress. Flexibility means the body can function efficiently in multiple states without discomfort. It does not become overly dependent on constant carbohydrate intake for energy, nor does it require extreme fasting to access fat stores. Instead, it learns to operate smoothly across a range of conditions. This is why the concept of metabolic flexibility is so important in understanding long-term energy balance. It represents a system that is adaptable rather than rigid. While these approaches can be useful for many people, it is also important to recognize that they are not suitable for everyone in the same way. Individuals with certain medical conditions need to approach changes in carbohydrate intake with caution. People managing diabetes or using medications that affect blood sugar should be especially careful, as changes in carbohydrate consumption can influence glucose regulation. Pregnant individuals also require stable and balanced nutrition, and aggressive changes in dietary structure may not be appropriate without guidance. Anyone with existing health conditions should always consider professional medical advice before making significant dietary adjustments. The body responds differently depending on individual health status, metabolic history, and medication use. What works smoothly for one person may require modification for another. This is why awareness and caution are essential when exploring any approach that influences energy metabolism. The goal is always stability, not disruption. The intention is to understand how the system works and support it in a way that aligns with individual needs, rather than forcing it into an extreme pattern that may not be sustainable or safe. As this video comes to an end, everything starts to connect into one simple truth. Fat burning was never just about discipline. It was never only about pushing harder, eating less, or forcing yourself through more suffering. For a long time, people have believed that willpower is the main driver of change. But the deeper reality is different. Your body is not just responding to effort. It is responding to internal conditions. It is responding to biology. It is responding to how energy is stored, how it is released, and what fuel is available at any given moment. Behind every decision your body makes, there are hidden systems working silently in the background. Glycogen storage, insulin response, fat oxidation, metabolic flexibility. These are not abstract ideas. They are active processes happening inside you right now. When these systems are understood, everything about fat loss starts to look different. It stops being a battle of willpower and starts becoming a process of awareness. Instead of forcing your body into extreme states, you begin to recognize how it naturally shifts between different fuel sources. Most people are still trapped in a simple belief: eat less, suffer more, and eventually lose fat. But the body does not always respond to suffering in the way people expect. Sometimes it adapts. Sometimes it resists. Sometimes it holds on. This is why so many people feel stuck, even when they are trying harder than ever. The missing piece is not effort. The missing piece is understanding how the system actually works. The idea you learned in this video is not about shortcuts or extreme methods. The carb trick is not magic. It is not a secret hack that bypasses biology. It is simply a way of influencing fuel availability inside the body so it can naturally shift toward using stored energy more efficiently. Nothing artificial, nothing forced, just working with the structure that already exists within you. When you see it this way, everything becomes clearer. You do not need to starve yourself to make progress. You do not need to fear carbohydrates or treat food as an enemy. Food is not the problem. Misunderstanding food is where confusion begins. Once you understand how your body actually uses energy, your decisions become calmer, smarter, and more aligned with how the system is designed to function. And that is the real shift. Not control, not punishment, not restriction, but understanding. Because when you finally understand the system, you stop working against your body and you start working with it. And that changes everything about how progress feels and how sustainable it becomes over time. If this video helped you see fat loss in a new way, make sure to like this video so more people can discover this information. Share it with someone who is struggling and needs a clearer understanding of how the body actually works. And do not forget to subscribe to Neuro Motivation Lab for more deep, simple, and powerful breakdowns that help you understand your mind, your body, and your potential on a deeper level.